Good morning, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf, and oh my gosh, there's a lot going on. I imagine a lot of the things that Erdogan has been doing, he may, perhaps in hindsight, think that he made a few errors because that situation is going to pieces, amongst plenty others. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf, and as you know, we've got a lot to talk about. Laith updates us from the region. Before we get going, let me show everyone what we're trying to accomplish here. This is Laith's site. It's called freepalestine.video. It is an outstanding website. As you can see, look at all of the video, look at everything going on. They got their latest episodes. They got field reports where really brave and talented journalists go out into dangerous areas and do field reports. As we know, recently, sadly, a couple of Russian battlefield reporters sadly were attacked in eastern Ukraine, what is now, I guess, the new Russian territories, and killed. They were targeted. So this battlefield reporting in journalism is very, very dangerous stuff. So we can be thankful for the people over at freepalestine.video that does that. Go there. As you can see, what's very, very important is that second little box that says donate, so you can donate and you can help keep their work going. It's all in English language. Very important stuff. So thank you very much. We appreciate the hard work you do, Laith. And also importantly, everybody, share this on all your social media platforms. And when you share it, make sure you put in a little note asking people not just to donate, but if they can, to become a monthly donor. Remember, you can donate like $20 or $100, whatever you can. But if you do $5, $10 a month, man, those really start to build up. You get that recurring monthly revenue. We need this info. Thank you very much, Laith. Let's get going. My first question, there's terrible things going on. Of course, the Palestinians, as always, are near and dear to our hearts, and it's horrible what's happening to them. But we need to start with something. I'll tell you why I want to start with this. Because the news in the West hasn't really been covering it. And of course, what coverage they do is not appropriate. We just get the neocon perspective. What the hell is going on in Turkey? I mean, it looks a mess.
Definitely. Look, the last election in Turkey, the only opposition that was viable was the mayor of Istanbul, Imamoglu, his last name is, and he almost won the election. So Erdogan, high on the genocide that he's committing in Syria and the looting and occupation of Syrian land, and how the West has allowed him to do this, and all the eyes being on the region in Gaza and the West Bank and Yemen, he thought that he can go a step further and end any possibility for a viable opposition to him in the next election by arresting the mayor of Istanbul. And a few things we need to note here is that they're charging the mayor with faking his university degree from a university in the occupied parts of Cyprus, the Turkish occupied parts of Cyprus island, and charging those who are around this mayor with corruption. Now, obviously, it's very possible that this guy faked his, university degree, and it's very plausible that everybody around him is corrupt. But that's the reality for every other politician in Turkey.
In America, too. Politicians that are corrupt. Come on, whoever would think of that in the West?
Yes. So clearly, it's the same thing with what happened with Trump. It's not that he's more corrupt than the other politicians or more maniac than the rest of the politicians in the US. Similarly, what happened in Romania right now. So in general, we're seeing, Erdogan attempting to kill the possibility of opposition to him. But he miscalculated. And why would I say he miscalculated here? Is because the mayor of Istanbul, Imanoglu, is actually from the Alawite sect. And he is allied with all the other minorities that make up the majority of the inhabitants of Istanbul itself. Okay. And therefore, the Kurds, the Armenians, the Sufis, and also the nationalists are all behind this guy. And so it's not that he's outside the establishment of the ruling classes in Turkey, but given that the Turkish military has been assisting the Wahhabi death squads in genocide, Alawis specifically in the coast of Syria, we already were seeing troubles rising up in the southern parts of Turkey, where the majority of the Alawites reside, close to the border of Syria, with threats coming from the Alawite leadership to take up arms against the Turkish military and government if they continue supporting the genocide of the Alawis. So this added to the troubles that we see between the Kurdish and Turkish population around, again, Syria, on the border of Syria, where on the other side there's Kurdish populations. The miscalculation of Erdogan was to decide to take out Imanoglu at this crucial moment. He could have probably taken him out in a different day prior to the beginning of the genocide in Syria, and or later on, a few years later, when we get nearer to another election or something, and the troubles in Syria were not affecting directly the mood in Turkey. But his overconfidence with his immunity within Western elite structures, made him do this miscalculation. And now we see it's been now 4 days of nonstop riots all across Turkey, concentrated around the, economic capital region, Istanbul, and the south of the country, much of the south of the country, the whole coast. And this is now threatening, really, the stability of the country. We saw Erdogan shutting down all communication, basically internet to all these social media platforms and so forth. So all that we get to see right now are from videos being somehow sneaked out. And given the fact that all the Western media, as well as Al Jazeera, are pro-Erdogan, pro-Turkey, pro-NATO, where even we're not seeing anything come out on the international news circuits, and for me as a Syrian, I see this as a good situation, even though that clearly Imanoglu is not a great guy. But the more Turkey is busy with its own internal problems, and the more that Erdogan has to compromise with other sections of Turkish society, the better future Syria will have.
It also, as soon as I saw this happening, and I couldn't believe the crowds, I thought this Syria brought this about. That's what I thought, that this was a miscalculation on his part. Let me ask you this: what do you think about this? My thoughts are this: the minorities, if you're a minority religion or group of whatever kind, ethnicity in Syria, in Turkey, and you see your country assisting and basically blessing and supporting the assassination, ethnic cleansing of minorities in a country that they took over, and you're a minority of any kind in Turkey, you have to start worrying. If you're a Kurd or an Alawite or whatever, anything in Turkey, and you're looking at what's happening in Syria, you have to start thinking, they may come home and start doing that to me next. So I would imagine that this is born of fear of, if you see your best friend go stab 5 people and come jump in the car and say, let's go. You're thinking to yourself, holy crap, if I just say no, you just stabbed some people, I'm calling the police. He'll probably stab me. You know what I mean? A total and complete distrust. So I think that this is directly as a result a destabilization, not just of taking over Syria, but of supporting the ethnic cleansing and the brutality that's going on in Syria. What do you think?
You are absolutely right, and you add to it the fact that yes, the Alawites are being massacred in the coast of Syria, and the largest section of the Alawites around the world is actually in Turkey on the border of Syria. You add to it the fact that all these Turkic, Wahhabi death squads and their extended families from Central Asia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Uzbeks, Uyghurs, and so forth, are being flown in, tens of thousands of them over the last 2 months. The extended families of the ISIS, Wahhabi death squads, HTS that are inside Syria right now are being moved from Central Asia to Turkey and then to Syria to do a colonization process after the ethnic cleansing of Alawites and Christians and Druze and Shia from Western Syria and Northern Syria. This is the people that are living in Turkey that are from these religious and ethnic minorities are watching a process of ethnic cleansing and colonization that they remember from the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, and World War I, and Armenian genocide and the Assyrian and Syrian genocide, all repeating in front of their eyes. And if they stay silent at this moment, Erdogan could do that inside and within Turkish borders. Well, what's going to stop him from just diverting these hundreds of thousands of Turkic, Mongolic hordes that he's bringing from Central Asia towards the areas where Kurds and the remnants of Assyrians and Arabs and Armenians still live inside Turkey? Why would he stop at demographic change in Tartus and Latakia of Syria? Why wouldn't he continue and have demographic change in Istanbul as a city to make it into an Ottoman, neo-Ottoman capital? Okay, so this is the reality, and Erdogan, he's watching that Netanyahu is allowed to do this same project in the greater Syria region, and the West is supplying it, and the Western media are applauding it. The ethnic cleansing of Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine goes unhindered. So he thinks he also deserves the same support and applaud from the West as Netanyahu does.
Yeah, I think they put themselves in the same position as Romania, where they took someone who had some level of popularity and they grabbed the guy and they made it clear the system doesn't want him in. And now I don't think Romania will be able to be, kept peaceful because, whoever they stick in now or however it happens, the people are going to be mad. And the people might not even have wanted him, but after the government took him out, they want him. I think that's what Erdogan has done, because now that he basically, kidnapped the guy and threw some fake charges at him, fake or real. Well, you kidnap the guy, it's obvious what happens. Any kind of election, this guy wins in a blowout. He created a dynamic now where the people now support him. I don't see how he can continue. Now he has to become a military dictator, basically, over Turkey. That's the only option that he has left now, because I don't think he'll be able to maintain the illusion of democracy any longer. It's interesting. That's one thing we're seeing in the West, and that is a lot. So many of these places in the West who had the illusion of democracy, and now that their colonialism is challenged, they're dispensing with that illusion. They can't afford it anymore. Let's move on let's go right to what's happening in Israel and Gaza. One of the things I want to ask you about is this. There are those in the West who are starting to say, Israel's unstable and Israel could have a civil war. The Shin Bet guy got fired. There's charges all over the place for corruption at Netanyahu, but he's doing everything he can to wiggle out of those. And there is the appearance of, there's also talks that the military leaders aren't all that thrilled about going back to war, that there's people not showing up, that there is great discord inside of Israel over policy, and that Israel, they're doing these horrors, but internally they're extremely politically unstable. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, maybe a year and a half ago, I would have fell for that. But after an assessment to what has happened over the last year and a half, a little bit more than that, since the beginning of this genocide, I believe that all this talk about the possibility of civil war in the Zionist colony and or collapse internally are propaganda purposefully put out by the Zionists to make their enemies make the mistakes of thinking they're weak. And it may have been part of the miscalculation that the axis of resistance did in October 7th and after during the war, thinking that if they don't have to go full force, that they just have to bleed the Zionist colony, it will collapse internally somehow. Similarly, it was a miscalculation by the axis of resistance to believe that there is such a thing as democracy and freedom of speech and human rights in the West, that they depended on, that they thought that because of the people in the West coming out in the streets or voicing their displeasure with the genocide, that somehow that will change what these Western governments are going to do, or that's going to threaten the stability of these Western governments. No. Netanyahu has, if there was any possibility of threat to Netanyahu before October 7th, he managed to, take out all the bases of power within the society in Israel, whether it's the changes that he made to the Supreme Court and or the changes that we saw over the last year and a half within the military and security apparatuses. You mentioned, of course, the removal of all those generals and commander-in-chief and so on of the Israeli military, and then eventually the various security, the police being purged by Ben Gvir, and now the Shin Bet and Mossad finally being purged. And all of these institutions that control society in Israel have now Kahanist, Armageddonists, Jewish white supremacists, religious Jewish white supremacists that are in charge of them. And the old guard of the liberal, secularist, somehow Jewish supremacists, which, in my mind, as a person, doesn't fit in my mind. How can you call yourself a secularist and a Jew at the same time? But, this is the upside down world that we have been living in. And now are purged. There's no more old guard. So there is no opposition to Netanyahu. And to think about a civil war, you need an armed opposition. And there is no, I have never seen a Zionist kill another Zionist, except with the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin in the 1990s. Right?
And that was MI6. That was probably, from my understanding. Well, I'm not saying it was MI6. How about it like this? I suspect Western intelligence was involved in that. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, and the guy that killed him was a Kahanist, who are right now in charge of all of the government and structures of power in Israel, including the media. So what opposition are we talking about that's going to cause any civil war? Not going to happen. Saying that, I believe they are also getting very arrogant, to the point where we saw yesterday the assassination of Palestinian journalist Hossam Shabat, who was a young guy, who became famous as a journalist in Gaza. And the Israelis just published a statement. The Israeli IDF, the Israeli occupation forces, saying that, admitting that they purposefully targeted him and assassinated him, claiming that he's a member of Hamas. Okay. So after killing 200 somewhat Palestinian journalists for a year and a half, and the Western media as a whole not saying anything against that, and having no consequence for that, and lying every time, claiming that it wasn't on purpose, now they feel comfortable enough to openly say, we are killing Palestinian journalists, and you got nothing, you can't stop us. Okay, so this is the overall attitude in the Zionist camp now, even inside the United States. For instance, this Bitar, which is one of the Kahanist, again, fascist Jewish supremacist organizations in the world, Bitar USA, is sending threats on Twitter, telling people that they'll pay $1,500 to send pagers to this or that journalist and or activist inside the United States openly. So the threats of murder and killing of journalists inside the Western society is now normalized. We didn't reach yet the actual killing stage. But if these Zionists are so emboldened that they openly put money out in public as registered charitable organizations, by the way, on the social media, to kill citizens of Western societies that are journalists, then what's left is the actual killing stage. Richard Medhurst, who everybody knows, Syrian British journalist, has been accused by the Austrian authorities of being the only Christian member of Hamas. This is the stage where we're getting. Is Richard Medhurst going to be assassinated by Israel now because the Austrian authorities have given them this bullshit excuse that he is a Christian member of Hamas? Will us, FPTV, Free Palestine TV, our journalists on the ground here in Lebanon and in the West Bank, will we also be killed and nobody's going to say anything? This is where we at. And so I don't see any possibility of an internal collapse in the sense of a civil war. So I think the only path forward is defeat for the Zionist colony. If we can't defeat it, and we can't defeat the imperialists, God help us all. And I don't mean only people here in the region, but people all around the world. You're all citizens of the West are going to be as expandable as we are.
And let me add this. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is a Gray Zone article. Google imports ex-Israeli spies who automated the Gaza genocide. And if you look at this article, Unit 8200. So Google bought an Israeli cybersecurity company, Wiz, for $32 billion. And the people there, it was started. Bottom line is, it's one of these Unit 8200. So one of the things they're doing is just inculcating the Israeli spy agencies into what's so-called media, you know what I mean, stuff. And one of the things I think that we're seeing here, and it aligns with what you were saying. Okay, because that's why I asked you what you thought about the discussion about a civil war and instability and internal. In order to, this is the way I feel, in order to have a civil war, you have to have a country. I don't see Israel as a country. I see it as a military and intelligence outpost for the U.S. empire. And it gives them some level of plausible deniability, so they can then say, well, Israel is dragging us around. We don't want to do this, but if we're trying to stop Israel, you know what I recall? I recall Israel, the Israelis had bombed some hospital, did some horrendous act, of course. And everyone around the world was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Why'd they do this? And then the US, the Blinken and, Biden administration, they shouldn't have done that. That was bad. And the Israeli leadership came out and said, hey, Tony Blinken sat in the meeting and Tony Blinken approved the targeting of that, whatever it was. I think it was a hospital. And then the Biden administration immediately shut up. And what they were doing was, I think, letting everybody know, you're blaming us. Yeah, we're doing it. We're evil, it's what we do. But every single thing that we do, is the targeting is by them. It's their space stuff that we're using. It's their, you know what I mean? And I just see this as the United States empire wants to do terrible, terrible, terrible things. And they want a little bit of plausible but deniability. So they stick Israel out there. They got Israel out there to say, oh, that's a country that we're negotiating with because it's not really us. And now, if in fact there was instability, let's just say for 1 second, there was some level of instability in Israel, right? The U.S. empire would come in and mow down the opposition in Israel, just like they do to Gaza, until they got it there. You know what I mean? If there was a bunch of Israelis saying, hey, we're not going to stop until this thing is Netanyahu is done, they just as soon to mow them down with machine guns as they would. This is the U.S. empire, and it is a tool of the U.S. empire, and it will remain a tool of the U.S. empire. That's the way I see it. And to me, the whole thing is plausible deniability for the U.S. empire. But it's like, to me, I would put it like this. That's like I strangle somebody to death and you say, Garland, that's terrible. Well, I can't control my hands. I mean, they just did it. I mean, my hands forced. I looked at them and I said, don't do it. And my hands reached out and that's absurd. These are my hands. They're directed by my brain. To me, when the U.S. says, oh, we can't believe Israel did it, it will be like me saying, I can't believe my hands did it. That's the way I view it. What do you think of that view?
You know, another reason that the Israelis will not have a civil war is that any one of them who has any frustration or anger can go down to the West Bank and Gaza and just hunt brown people, Arabs, kill children as they wish, and women and whatever it is. So you don't have this kind of pressure cooker inside Israel as a society that could lead to somebody carrying arms within them. So that's the truth. And in fact, I would say right now at this moment, any Western citizen can go down to the Zionist colony and kill at will Arabs in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, and have that joy and get back to their society in the West and continue making money and have no consequences. This is how utterly dehumanized Arabs are right now. And I would say, look at what happened in the West Bank yesterday. The director of one of the co-directors of the Oscar-winning documentary, No Other Land. His name is Hamdan Balal. Zionist colonist gangs attacked his home, pulled him out in the street, lynched him. Okay. While the Israeli military were just watching them lynch him for daring to win an Oscar documentary about the situation in the West Bank. And then the Israeli military, after the lynching, well, after he was, on the edge of death, basically, intervened and arrested him, and now have disappeared him in the dungeons of the Zionist colony, torture dungeons. And so right now we have an Oscar-winning director. That's a recent Oscar. It's not somebody like an old school, that's been in the headlines of the United States and Western mainstream media for the last month and so, since the Oscars, disappeared, and nobody's going to care about him after being lynched. Okay, so it's clear that the situation has surpassed any possibility of consequences from within the imperial order for the Zionist colony. As you said, the U.S. wants it to happen. What the Zionists are doing is a service to Western imperialism, and you add to it, what is happening in the U.S. in terms of the universities, putting all the Arabic studies, Palestinian studies, African studies, Asian studies programs under stewardship, and there's another word for it, under you know, control of a direct government appointee. Okay. And stripping away the power of the chairs of these departments in universities to decide what's being taught in these academic programs, and the mass deportations of Venezuelans and other Latinos to the death camps in El Salvador. And even as we saw over the last week, at least 3 different Canadian whites that have valid working contracts and visas in the United States being disappeared for weeks inside the ICE camps. I mean, we're at the edge of a reality that I don't think anybody can predict where it's going to go. Like, I personally think we are going to end up in internment camps and mass deportations of primarily Arab and Muslim peoples in the West, and anyone that is undesirable. Hey, we're getting to that stage of getting rid of the undesirables. Add to it those assisted suicide programs that most of the Western countries have. You know, I mean, come on. Hitler would be dreaming of what is being legalized in the West right now. He was made into the biggest monster in Western history for the basic things that our Western governments are applying right now to their undesirables, and there's not a modicum of rebellion in these Western societies. I predict we're gonna get to the worst point before anything happens within those societies. Therefore, Israel is safe. It will continue receiving everything it wants from the Washington and London and Paris and Berlin.
Absolutely. Well, you know, as we've seen, such as we've seen with these universities, it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or what you're complaining about. They simply redefine it. If someone says, well, I think there's Palestinians, I don't like what's happening there, they redefine that. Oh, that's anti-Semitism, you got to go. So even if you're not doing anything wrong, if you say, well, I think perhaps the government could do things differently. Oh, you're a terrorist. You got to go. You know what I mean? They'll just, it doesn't, if you say, well, it sure is a nice day outside, they just simply reinterpret what you're saying to mean something that gives them the ability to do whatever they want and then throw you in a camp. I mean, literally, you're taking people, throwing them, taking them to other countries, El Salvador, or whatever, who cares?
You reminded me of what happened last night in UCLA right now. Actually, I almost totally forgot this. I mean, it already happened, last year, that, there's a student encampment that was set up yesterday in UCLA, and a mob of Jewish supremacists carrying Israeli flags invaded the campus of UCLA in Los Angeles while the police are watching, and let them invade the actual campus. There's entrances that the police were manning to the campus, that they let them through. And for 7 hours straight, this mob of Jewish white supremacists were beating and lynching the students and the university professors and workers that were in the encampment, before finally the police moved in to stop the mob from lynching these peaceful demonstrators. But they still didn't arrest anybody. And this happened already last year. Okay, so if you're getting to a point of kind of like KKK mobs, but JJJ mobs, let's call them, Jewish supremacists, JJJ mobs, being able to roam the streets and invade private property and lynch people and beat them on live broadcasted television while the police watched that happening. Because, by the way, the police had a fight with the UCLA encampments last year. and I guess they wanted the revenge from these students. I mean, this is dangerous territory, lines that have not been passed since the 1970s, I think, in the United States, in terms of racialized violence that is protected by the state, openly racialized violence. Of course, racialized violence has always been protected by the state in the USA, but now it's open mob violence that is protected by the state. This is another marker on the path to hell.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Yemen, Ansar Allah, very interesting. The U.S. again is, that we saw what was supposed to be a leak or whatever, and it appears that I don't think it was a leak. I think it was intentional. For what we could talk about who did it and why. That's a whole nother story. But here's the bottom line: for all of their talk about going after Russia, China, whoever, Iran, Yemen seems to always be beating the crap out of them. They can't defeat Yemen. Yemen hits them with missiles, closed down Ben Gurion Airport. The U.S., ships are out there. They're ducking and dodging out of the Red Sea. They're firing $2 million missiles to stop $5,000 drone. I mean, it just seems like a chess match that they're constantly losing against Yemen, and they bomb them, and the Yemen people, the people in Yemen celebrate. Hooray! We get to fight the imperialist evil devils, and then do what they're going to do. It's interesting. What are your thoughts on what's happening with the Yemen resistance?
Well, can you imagine, like, say, me and you, the world champion boxer of the heavyweights, comes out in a public TV broadcast and says they want to have a match with me or you, just like and saying that this is how they can prove that they are the world champion. I mean, I'd be very proud. I'll be like, yeah, I'll go in this ring, even if I'm gonna come out concussed. It means I was chosen by the champion in the world. In this case, the champion of genocide. That I am a worthy competitor. So yes, Yemen doesn't have to fight anymore versus the local vassals and the local, viceroys of the master in the White House. They're going head to head, and yesterday the Americans, in their bloodlust, the American military and American politicians, of course, the American people are innocent of what their government is doing. But the American military yesterday bombed the only cancer ward in northern Yemen. Okay. They are targeting now hospitals. They're targeting gas stations. They're targeting schools. They're targeting ports and airports in Yemen. These are not military targets. Okay. And just a few hours ago, it was made clear to us through radio communication that the United States is too scared now to actually get a second aircraft carrier that's on the way right now to replace the Truman aircraft carrier group that got damaged by the Yemeni missiles, hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. But the United States is scared right now to get the second aircraft carrier group to get close to Yemen. And therefore, they're sending B-2 bombers that have just landed in Diego Garcia island chain south of India, in the Indian Ocean, that they're going to now begin using B-2 bombers because their drones and their aircraft carriers are too prone to be hit by the Yemenis. That's another indication of how successful Yemen has been and how desperate the US is for it to bring its most advanced bombers that are going to have to fly almost on the edge of space to be safe from Yemeni air defenses. And I wonder, I mean, B-2 bombers, for the most part, carry the mother of all bombs, and nuclear heads. The B-2 bombers are not going to carry like regular GPUs. They were used to bomb Tora Bora, if you remember, with that mother of all bombs. That's what they're made for. So, where is the mother of all bombs going to be used on Yemen? On Sana'a, the capital? Are we going to see a whole destruction of cities in Yemen so the Zionists in the Zionist colony can continue the massacres in Gaza? And what will be the response of the Yemeni government and resistance to such mass slaughter? I personally hope that the Yemenis, if they are attacked by these B-2 bombers, with the mother of all bombs or other things, to that they should be targeting the oil and gas facilities in the Gulf and all the American bases in the region, and get them all like to pay for this, crazy behavior.
I suspect that if the U.S. accelerated to that level, that they would target, they would do the thing that would do the most damage and cause the most pain, which would be, I suspect, I don't know, I'm just guessing, they would target probably Saudi, maybe UAE oil facilities with a pretty massive bombardment that would do enough damage to take a lot of stuff out, I would suspect, because at that point, I mean, you've upped the stakes at that point. What do they have to lose? You're going to inflict as much pain on them. They're going to inflict as much pain as they can in reverse. And I suspect that would be next. I suspect they would. What's interesting also is the strategic brilliance of the Yemen of Ansar Allah, because as the U.S. attacks their infrastructure, they attacked Ben Gurion Airport and they announced to everyone it's not safe. Well, at that point, notwithstanding whether they even can hit it or not, you now have these airlines flying in planes that are worth $200 and $300 million each, saying we can't afford to even take a chance, because if our planes go down, and you have insurance companies now saying to the company, if you fly that plane into Ben Gurion, I'm not going to pay for it if it gets blown up. You're going to have to take a loss on that. Or if you do, the insurance is going to be through the roof. So they have severely impacted air travel in the Ben Gurion airport by their strategy of, you know what I mean? So they're not just throwing weapons, and they're not just, people try to pretend as they're these, inferior, just a bunch of guys running around in the desert. They got some pretty well thought out and very effective military strategies.
Oh yes, and in fact, we have visual evidence that the Yemenis were able to hit Ben Gurion Airport and the Kiryat, meaning the kind of the Pentagon of the Zionists, over the last 2 days. They're not able to shoot down these hypersonic missiles. And another thing that we should keep in mind here is that although you are right, the insurance companies are threatening to not cover the costs of any damage done to international airliners that are landing in Ben Gurion. But in the same note as how Western governments and Western corporations in general are risking the lives of their own citizens and the financial stability of their own societies and the rights of their own citizens in order to appease the Zionist colony, like what you just put, the Google purchasing this Israeli Mossad company. Maybe this Mossad company or Unit 8200, the military intelligence, has something valuable, maybe. But in reality, it's really just part of the subsidization process that keeps Israeli economy afloat and keeps the propaganda idea that somehow Zionists are more supreme than all of us, better than all of us in coding, better than all of us in programming. They're the best doctors, the best lawyers, the best actors. Gal Gadot, oh my God, she needs a star on a Hollywood path. Like she is, every Jew on this world is better than us in everything. This is part of this Google purchase and in general. So in that note, I think Western airline companies are going to risk the life of their own passengers and will risk financial ruin just so they can appease the Zionist colony and their Zionists in their own country, and they will continue flying in. And if they don't do that, Turkey will fill the gap for them, because Turkey is even a better Zionist lapdog than most countries. And the Turkish airlines already right now are replacing some of the airline carriers that are refusing to land in Ben Gurion and doubling their flights from Istanbul to Tel Aviv. It's crazy. So I think while Ansarullah and Yemen are doing great, this is up until now is not going to stop the transportation from the Ben Gurion airport. They have to destroy it if they want to end the possibility of its use. Otherwise, it's just, as we see, not going to stop the way that we want it to.
An example of what you're saying is look at Hollywood. It's collapsing. They did this movie called Captain America, and in there he had of all things, there was this cartoon superhero character, and her name of all things was Sabra, and she was a Mossad agent superhero, right? Okay, so in Captain America, they bring in this blue and white female superhero named Sabra, literally named after a Zionist genocide, and people were outside carrying signs and protesting the show, and it did horrible. Nobody would go to see it. You know what I mean? And to Hollywood, it was more important than who cares? Like the movie cost $300 million or something. It's a complete flop, not making. People are, protesting and things like that. But to Hollywood, it was more important to put this movie out there. If you lose $300 million, the Gal Gadot, who everybody's finally realizing she can't act. She's a very, very bad. She can't act. So they put her in this Snow White. And of course, it's exposed. It's a horrible movie. She's not a very good actress. And of course, people again said, hey, wait a minute. The genocide's going on. She was actually an IDF officer. So you have a lot of people upset. Trust me, that didn't help. Hollywood doesn't care. It's more important to them to put these movies in with people who support the Zionism and support, the Israeli project, whatever you want to call it, the U.S. imperialism. It's more important to do that. They don't care. They've probably lost $500 million in those two movies alone, which it appears to Hollywood, it's a small price to pay to support U.S. imperialism, the U.S. empire, and its attempt to dominate the world and to, slaughter people all throughout the Middle East and everywhere else, actually, because Zelensky, every time you turn around, they got him wandering around, plugging another medal on him or some other Nazi in Hollywood. Anyway, your thoughts?
Oh yes. I mean, Gal Gadot, by the way, she's not only a bad actress, she's ugly.
Yeah, she's.
I mean, they want to force on us to tell us, oh, she's like the symbol of Israeli beauty. Well, if that's the symbol of Israeli beauty, oh my God, what is the normal? And clearly, the Captain America movie there, I know people think that the word Sabra is in reference to the Sabra and Shatila massacre, but it's even more heinous than that, the naming of Sabra. Sabr and Sabbar and Sabra in Arabic are reference to the cactus and the cactus fruit. You have it in Mexico also, cactus fruit, and it grows everywhere in Palestine. And specifically during the 1947-48 genocide, the Nakba, a lot of Palestinians, as they're on the death marches, being kicked out of Palestine, wherever somebody died on these death marches, they buried them on the side of the street, and they threw in some seeds from the sabr or sabra, and it grows now. It's everywhere, kind of uncultivated areas, even that you'll see these cactus, forests or bushes. And so what the Zionists did is they wanted to take away, and by the way, the word sabr in Arabic means patience. Okay. And so you call this cactus the sabar, the most patient, because it doesn't need water that much,
Okay.
and patiently it can make this beautiful fruit that's so tasty. So the Zionists wanted to even steal this symbolism from the Palestinians, and they started claiming or naming the Zionist colonists that are born inside historic Palestine after 1948. They started calling them Sabra. Okay.
Oh,
Okay. So you see it how it's being used on that hummus, Sabra hummus. Okay, the Israeli
yes,
hummus.
yes.
Okay. And they're calling their superhero as Sabra. So they're like claiming indigeneity to the land of Palestine in naming this goddamn genocidal villain, not hero. I don't know if some of our viewers have ever seen the original comics where Hulk is beating back the Sabra because she's killing Palestinian children. In the actual comic of Marvel, Hulk beats her up because she's killing Palestinian children. She views them as they're going to grow up to be terrorists. Okay. And so they took this now, Marvel, Disney, and made it into a superhero. Even their little criticism that existed in the original comic, they stripped it away. And of course, it's going to flop because the only reason they decided to revive it today is because of the damage that the Zionists have done to their own project over the last year and a half, with the whole world hating them now as we all watch this genocide being committed.
And my opinion on Gal Gadot has been this. I actually think she's pretty. I think she's an attractive woman. But here's what I think.
We can agree to disagree,
Yeah,
okay?
certainly, yeah. But I think there's a symbolism there, and that is, what does she do? Number one, she's Wonder Woman. She's this superior warrior, right? The most moral army, the most powerful army, right? So she's this superior warrior, right? Now, what is it? She's a queen. She's powerful. She's in charge of everything. Yes, is she devious and evil, but she's in power, So it is to show, I think, to symbolize Zionism as number one, and most importantly, powerful. Whether you view it as Wonder Woman, who's out there fighting the bad guys, or whether you view it as this evil queen who's devious but really, really smart and devious, either way, the view that they want you to have of Zionism is of something extremely powerful, whether it's able to do good or evil. So they're always going to put her in a position, whereas, the traditional, it was some black guy, he's either the criminal, he's the guy that gets eaten by the monster 4 minutes into the movie. That works. Everybody knows in Hollywood, like, if there's a werewolf around and there's like 5 guys and they're like at the like sitting around a campfire, and they're like, hey, I hear growling and rustling in the woods. Tyrone, why don't you go check it out? Of course, the black guy goes over into the woods. Rawr! Oh my God, he's been mangled. Let's jump in the truck. And then, all the rest of the people go. I mean, that's Hollywood. The black guy always dies about 5 minutes. He gets mangled by the werewolf, the monster, thrown out of a plane. He's done. And of course, I guess the Zionist is either the queen or Wonder Woman. You got to love Hollywood, Was there one other thing? Oh, we only got about 5 minutes, but I did want an update on HT. Last I heard, the Israelis are now saying they're going to continue to occupy Lebanon, continue to occupy Syria, etc. And somebody asked me, what do you think about the Israelis doing that? And I said, as I always say, what Israelis? Israel is a U.S. military and intelligence base, and they're expanding the size of the base. That's the way I see it, that the U.S. empire says we need to expand the size of our military base. And that's the way I see it every time. We got about 5 minutes. Your thoughts?
Before I answer that, I want to say the reason I love Night of the Living Dead, Romero's, is because it was a black guy, the hero, right? And he was fighting off the hordes of white zombies. If you didn't notice that, right? And it was the white lady that he was protecting. this is what was amazing, I think, of a symbolism that most people that love horror movies forget about this 1968 classic. And you wish there's more of that symbolism in sci-fi that we used to love in the old sci-fi that today doesn't exist. Now you have outright propaganda like Wonder Woman instead of this sublime, amazing social commentary of of old science fiction and horror.
That was Night of the Living Dead was a great movie and scary, very back. Then it was very scary. It was dark. It was well made, because it was dark and the zombies were coming in. And back then, you watched it. It scared to death. I mean, I didn't see it in the '60s, of course, but when I saw it, it was a remote, in the '70s, whatever. And I was a kid. But I'm just saying that was compared to the garbage they make now. You know what I mean? The crap they make now. You're just like, everybody's a trans superhero or some such crap like that. They literally redid Conan. I talked about this recently. They redid Conan the Barbarian, which I used to love when I was a kid.
Oh my God.
Conan is now a female who is gay. So Conan is now, the barbarian is now a female instead of a male and has a black girlfriend because this female is a lesbian and leads like remember Conan had a group of barbarian guys that hung around with him. They're vegans. He ends up, what the hell about a gay vegans? That's get the hell out of here.
They didn't need to ruin Conan. I thank God. I mean, I didn't hear even about it, this remake, because me also as a kid, I watched that movie and I loved it. I mean, it was, but obviously violence and nudity, and you're a child, and you're like, okay, I like this.
Yeah, exactly.
But they could have just remade Xena.
Yeah,
they have to ruin Conan. Just remake Xena. That's like already like a lesbian.
No, I said Conan. It was Thundar. Thundar the Barbarian. I don't know if I said Conan. Man, it was Thundar.
Yeah, you said Conan. Okay.
Yeah, it was Thundar the Barbarian, which was a comic, which was a comic thing.
Oh,
in
yes,
the movie.
yes.
Now but now it's a woman, a gay woman with a gay black girlfriend, and they're all vegans. Like somebody picks up this big, like gigantic turkey leg and bites it, and they're like, oh, I think this was once an animal. Ew, because barbarians would never eat it. Get out.
So anyway, we strayed away into sci-fi and horror and the horrors of Hollywood. But to go back to the horrors of HTS and the Zionists in Syria, this morning the Israelis bombarded the Daraa province, and last night also. This is the province right on the border with Jordan. After the Golan Heights, they've been expanding over the last 2-3 days into parts of Daraa and to parts of Quneitra. At the same time, as the Wahhabi death squads are continuing their genocide in the coast in Hama, Homs, Latakia, and Aleppo, and Tartus. And according to the Malachite Greek Catholic Church and Mother Agnes Lacroix, who is very famous for the last 2 decades, covering as a nun the crimes that were committed inside Syria, she and the church have documented the names of 20,000 disappeared and another 20,000 confirmed killed over the last 3 weeks in the coast of Syria, in the west parts of Syria. So this is a huge number. It's heartbreaking. It's it seems like if we believe the numbers in Gaza, which I think are very much underestimated, but if we take those numbers of 40,000 in a year and a half in Gaza, the HTS has killed equal to that in 3 weeks. This is huge. There's huge, as we began this discussion, this episode, ethnic cleansing and demographic change and repopulation and colonization process that's happening in Western Syria that will have ramifications for decades, if not centuries. And if this project is successful, the depopulation of Western Syria and full change of its demographic, I don't know what's going to stop the rest of the powers in the world from following this barbaric example from the 1970s and from the 1700s, 1800s that we're seeing applied in Syria now?
Yeah, well, as the imperial powers deteriorate, as the U.S. and U.K. imperial France, etc., deteriorate, as they see the rise of other world powers, they're resorting to their most hysterical, barbaric roots, in my opinion. And and like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to dominate everything. Well, they just go crazy and just kill anybody, do anything that they need to do. The mask comes off. Because it was, hey, we've got to do this to protect women in this country, LGBTQ people. They always had an excuse why they were doing it for some good reason. And now that they feel threatened and that they see they may not be able to dominate, the mask is just off. And they're like, well, we can't afford to have the illusion of democracy. We can't afford the illusion that we're doing good work. We'll just go out and slaughter people and just oppress our own people and overthrow countries, our own included. So Laith Marouf, look, here's what's important before we go. I want to show you one more time before we go, and that is, oops, give me a second here. And I think it's important that everybody see this website, and it is freepalestine.video. That's the site I'm talking about. You see there, one-time monthly help fund our community. That is critical. Lots of good stuff all over here. Lots of good information and field reports and you name it. You can find out about them, go across the top, military operations, all kind of things going on. Make sure you follow them everywhere. But most importantly, if you can afford it, if I can figure, I keep doing this. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. And we'll go maybe to this. Okay, I'm somehow figuring this thing out. They're changing StreamYard and it's getting a little confusing at times. My point being, make sure you support freepalestine.tv. If you can't afford to donate, share it on all your social media platforms. Share it anyway, but everybody share this on all your social media platforms. And even if you can't afford to donate, everybody make sure you put a little note on the post that asks people to support. And like I do, make sure you say to people, hey, support, and if you can, make it monthly. It's important that we keep this going. There's not a lot of English language stuff coming out that isn't propaganda. This is good English language stuff coming out to the West that is not propaganda. And of course, as you know, with what happened with Google, look, they didn't, let me add this, you were right. Google did not have to hire 8,200 people to be, Unit 8,200 to be an intelligence operation. It's already an intelligence operation. This is just another way for them to throw $32 more billion at the Zionists and just, oh yeah, we've hired a bunch of people. They already probably worked there. If they didn't work there, they might as well, because they were doing what they wanted them to do and taking all of their information and heaving people off, So, what I just found out, Laith, remember the day I was let me show you something. The day, if I can find it, I can't find it. I was thrown off of Twitter, right? I was excuse me. Twitter said that they can no longer identify me as the owner of my Twitter account. Then that was August 22nd, 2023, when Twitter sent a message and says, hey, we don't know who you are. You can't get into this account, but we're still going to charge you, right? I was just researching the other day and I found that X uses an Israeli company to do their verification process, which they said they can't verify me. Do you know the day that Twitter started using that Israeli company? August 21st, 2023. Wow. August 21st, 2023, Twitter started using this Israeli company, X, to quote, verify people. The next day, I'm off Twitter. The day after that, Twitter says, the day after this Israeli company, they say this is the company that's going to verify people. The very next day, they're like, hey, Garland, we can't verify you as the owner of this account that you've had since 2009. So, sorry, we may be charging you for it, but you're locked out. I don't know. Maybe I'm suspicious. I don't think that's a coincidence. At any rate,
I definitely, there's so much black ops that are being done, and also so much in your face. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes in your face. It's overwhelming, but
but at
it
any
can't
rate,
last for too long. See you
yeah.
later, Habibi Garland. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
I got to run. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. We're out.